Week 6 of the college football season provides us with a lot of big matchups as most of the conferences are settled into conference play. We got Steve Merrill on the line from Pro Sports Info. It's prosportsinfo.com. Please join him there as he provides you with the best in the edge, getting the edge on the betting line and his products and services there, not just regarding college football, but the NFL, NBA, and with the Major League Baseball playoffs in full swing this week. Steve, how you doing today?
Hey, Mark, doing well.
Therefore, Steve, I'm looking at what I typically do in preparing for our segment is I'm looking for anything that really stood out to me last weekend, and it was a pretty tame weekend in regards to upsets. We almost had the monumental one in North Carolina with the Tar Heels taking that 2-point conversion shot against Clemson as a 28-point dog and losing by 1. Other than that, it's been a trend that I've mentioned to you a few times in the last few years that I've charted about 20 to 22% of the top 25 games are upsets outright against the money line. But there was only one last weekend that I see with Arizona State winning by as a 4-point dog against Cal. So we stand pat last week, but just kind of your thoughts about the trends that you've seen in recent weeks and where we're headed.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as the season goes on, the odds should get sharper and sharper because we have more statistics. The odds makers have more results and statistics to work with. So you can make an argument that, September, you're going to see more big upsets where double-digit dogs are winning outright. You're going to see less of that in October and November just because, at that point, a double-digit dog is legitimately a double-digit dog for a reason. A lot of times, odds makers and professional bettors alike and the public, they don't have a good feel for these teams in just games 1 or 2 when there's no preseason. You got 18 or 19-year-olds, many of which didn't even play the year before. So I think as the season goes on, we're going to see less of these big upsets. But then you reference like the Clemson game. You remember a couple years ago around week 3 or 4, late September, I believe, is when they went up to Syracuse and almost, had that debacle as a huge favorite. So you are going to occasionally get it to happen. A lot of times it's just flat spots on the schedule because one thing to keep in mind, it's very difficult to have your A game each and every week. I know they only play, 11 or 12 games. Everyone is extremely critical, but you're still talking about 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, and there's always going to be flat spots. And I think that's what we saw last week with Clemson. If anything, it'll probably spur them to a much better future effort the next few weeks.
Sorry about that. I had a call coming in. I'll edit that.
That's fine.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the weekly betting lines. We got Steve Merrill on the line, as we typically do on Fridays, to help us out with the big matchups. 2 from the Big Ten. Iowa, Michigan. This one reminds me of the game a couple weeks back where Michigan traveled to Wisconsin, got bloodied from the opening drive on 35-0 at half, blown away as a 3.5-point dog at Wisconsin, a game in which Michigan would have been a preseason favorite against Wisconsin all the way through, but the Badgers playing much better football at that point. The point spread doesn't match, but Iowa, a very similar football team to Wisconsin in regards to, what you're going to get. They may not be the most talented in the world. They're going to run the football. They're going to play hard-nosed defense. They're a tough bunch that's not going to get rattled. They're going to Michigan as what I believe was a full touchdown underdog to start the week, and now it's down to about 3.5 points.
Yeah, line definitely dropped, and for good reason. That opening number was too high. I think at 3 or less, I would lean Michigan in this game if we get down there, but I've actually seen it go back up to 4 now as of Friday afternoon in some spots. So I don't think it's going to drop to that key number of 3. On the surface, it does look like Iowa's a better team right now. They both have a common opponent in Middle Tennessee. Michigan, a lackluster 19-point non-covering win in week 1. Meanwhile, Iowa beat them by 45 last week. Michigan was actually a 12-point bigger favorite when they played them as well. So the odds makers have obviously been inflating the lines on Michigan, and that's why they were 0-3 against the spread until last week. I actually had them as a best bet for my clients last Saturday, minus 27. They win the game 52-0 against Rutgers. I thought it was a good bounce-back spot. It obviously is a concern that they gave up the 359 rushing yards to Wisconsin the week before. Iowa ran for over 300 yards last week against Middle Tennessee. But I still think this is a good Michigan team. I think they'll get better as the season goes on. And defensively, despite that bad showing against Wisconsin, they still allow just 19 points a game and just 4.5 yards per play. So this is still a strong defense statistically. And I think we actually maybe start getting some value with them now after their slow start.
Let's stay in the Big Ten, Steve. We've got Michigan State visiting Ohio State, and the Buckeyes have been so impressive that I opened up the betting lines on Monday and saw 20 and my eyes bulged out. Michigan State with maybe the best defense in the country, a 20-point underdog in Columbus. But that was my initial reaction. My second reaction was two very similar teams 2 years ago. Michigan State finished in the top 15 in the country, went 10-3, won a bowl game. They went to Columbus in a similar situation and lost 45-3. So I guess maybe the line's possible.
Yeah, and I went 3-1 last Saturday. My best bets for my personal clients. The only game I missed was the Nebraska-Ohio State game. So this Ohio State team is definitely playing better than expected. They're crushing the line right now, and for that reason, the odds makers have to inflate the number. And this line is definitely inflated. Now, it's always dangerous going against a team that's averaging 52 points a game like Ohio State, a team that's put up 48 or more in each of their past 3 games. They've put up 42 or more in all 5 games this season. But as you said, Mark, they're taking on a great defense right now. Very seldom in conference play in October are you going to get an underdog that is getting more points than they allow in the season. Michigan State allows just 15 points a game and only 3.9 yards per play. And we're getting them as a nearly 3-touchdown dog here. I like the under also for that reason. I think if you like Michigan State, you got to lean towards the under 49 as they're going to be somewhat correlated in this game. Michigan State does not want to get in a shootout.
We're breaking down the Week 6 matchups, the big ones across college football in the Big Ten first. Now we move to the SEC. Please join Steve Merrill at prosportsinfo.com. He's got everything that you would ever want in regards to products and services to get you the edge on your wagering. Major League Baseball, the NBA coming up soon, the NFL, and of course college football. In the SEC, we've got an Auburn team that may have the best resume in the country in regards to taking on the likes of Oregon, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, winning all those games, the last 2 very impressively. Going on the road this time to take on the Florida Gators, not necessarily impressive, but winning the games. So a Florida team ranked in the top 10, haven't lost, a 2.5-point underdog at home, where it's typically a big home field advantage there in the Swamp.
Yeah, very impressive what Auburn's done, especially last week. Keep in mind what a terrible scheduling spot that game was last week against Mississippi State. They're coming off the road upset win at Texas A&M. They had this huge look-ahead road game at Florida this week, and they're laying a touchdown at home sandwiched in between last week. And not only did they win the game, but they win it by 33 points despite having a -1 turnover margin. So this is a very good Auburn team, very balanced offense with, a young freshman quarterback. They're still running for 250 yards a game, throwing for almost 8 yards a pass. And Florida, also a young quarterback, they're throwing the ball extremely well, over 9 yards per pass this year. The problem is they're not running the ball nearly as well as Auburn, and that is a concern here. But with that said, these are 2 very good defenses. Whenever you get a Florida team, any team in conference play in October that's allowing less than 9 points a game on the season, and we're getting them as a home dog, that always catches my attention. This line is currently 2.5 minus $1.15, which means it's very close to hitting that key number of 3. If we can get to +3 or more on Saturday, I think Florida's the way to play this one.
Week 6 betting lines, courtesy Steve Merrill from Pro Sports Info. Please check him out right there. We give you 3 games each week, the big national matchups. And then Steve typically goes under the radar, grabs something of value to let us know where we might gain an edge. Steve, what do you have for us this week?
Yeah, it's not a mid-major team. Last week we used Oklahoma State. We played against Kansas State. That actually turned out to be one of my best bet winners on Saturday for my personal clients. So I'm going to go with another, Power 5 conference, but a game not a lot of people are talking about, and that's Minnesota -14. It's sitting on a very key number right now, the 2-touchdown number. At 14 or less, I like Minnesota here against a really bad Illinois team. They might be 2-2 straight up on the season, but they're 0-2 the last couple weeks, losing to Eastern Michigan and then losing to Nebraska. Now, they did get the bye week, but I'm not sure that's going to be enough to make a difference here. Minnesota does not run the ball well, and normally that's a huge concern for me, but they're averaging almost 11.5 yards per pass, and they're now taking on an Illinois pass defense that's given up over 8 yards per pass this season. And by the way, Illinois' opponents have averaged just 7.4. So Minnesota's averaging almost 4 yards per pass attempt more than the average opponent Illinois has faced, and Illinois still has a bad pass defense. This is just one of those matchups I look for each and every week when I scan the card. I just think it's a huge mismatch. And the fact it's a passing mismatch means they can get big scores, quick scores, and that'll enable them to win this game by more than 2 touchdowns. So take a look at the Minnesota Golden Gophers -14 or less on Saturday.
Interesting call right there. The Minnesota quarterback Tanner Morgan last week hit on a phenomenal 21 of 22 passes against Purdue as they rang up 38 points. And this is a Minnesota offense that isn't typically prolific, but right now they have a trio of wide receivers that are amongst the best in the Big Ten. Steve Merrill joins us on a regular basis each and every week to set us up for the college football weekend. Steve, we appreciate you stopping by.
Thanks, Mark.